Hello everyone, this is a response video to Metal Mickey. He has a really cool challenge called the 1, 2, 3 album challenge. I picked up on this through Mark G with a C, so I want to make sure to give him a shout out. And Metal Mickey, thank you for presenting this, because this was really fun and got me thinking. So the premise is you have to pick a favorite album by a band that is a debut, and then your next choice is your favorite album by the band has to be their second release. Then after that, your favorite album by the band has to be their third. Then after that, your favorite fourth, fifth, and so on, to see how far you could get. So, of course, as you can tell, I got a good spread going here, and we're going to try to dip into this the best we could. And or the best I can, because it's impossible to just narrow down a favorite. But it did get really tricky around the 7 and 8 range, because some of those jumped way over. Like I had my number 12 favorite would have been Painkiller by Judas Priest. Let's see what else. Number 17 would have been Surf's Up by the Beach Boys. So I didn't stick with strictly metal in this whole list, but I did not go that far either. I couldn't make it that far. Once I got a cutoff, that's where we stopped, and we're now doing this. So starting off, the favorite album by this band is their debut. There's a little bit of a cheat here, but that's okay, because we're just talking about what we like, right? Black Flag, first 4 years. This is actually a collaboration, or a compilation, I should say, of all of their early stuff put onto one tape. You can see that I have had this beast forever. Forever. That's right. Very cool stuff. This cassette came to me through one of my dad's friends, a truck driver that was stopping by, heard that I was getting into punk rock and heavy metal, and knew that I did not have a lot of access to some of the stuff that's from the West Coast. He had this cassette in his truck and brought it, a Red Hot Chili Peppers tape, and a Beastie Boys, the Pollywog Stew EP. Brought that to me as well. Gave me all three of those, the self-titled Red Hot Chili Peppers. Totally changed my life. I'd been reading about it in Thrasher magazine, but had never quite heard it. I knew about some other metal stuff that I could get out of a BMG catalog, but this just blew my mind, and it's still one of my favorites of all time, period. It's just one of my favorites, and I'm so glad that I still have this in my possession. So since I'm cheating a little bit on this, and man, this is the burner. I couldn't leave it out. I decided to also pick a straight-up debut, and that is the self-titled Suicidal Tendencies. Another record that, or I should say cassette, that's been in my arsenal from day one. Look at that thing falling apart, of course. This is the same one that I've had that I used to jam in my car in high school. The same one I had years before that when I was getting into the punk rock scene. And heavy metal for that reason. Or I should say that way. Suicidal Tendencies, of course, they need no introduction. They are the masters, and this is an absolute classic record. Definitely one I highly recommend. If you've never heard it for some reason, check out the Suicidal Tendencies self-titled. You'll not be upset by that in the least. So coming up next, my favorite album by this band is their second release. Another one from the archive. This, I don't even have the cover. I wish I did. But this one came to me by way of a friend, and I can't remember if he gave it to me or if I just acquired it and it never got back to him. We're still friends to this day, so Chris, if you're watching this and this is your cassette, I'm going to keep it for a little while longer if you don't mind. It's only been 40 years. Vengeance Rising, Once Dead. This is actually a Christian heavy metal band, or I should say Christian death metal band, and they are the ones that turned me into a death metal fan. So of all the people who are saying that there's not good stuff out there that's religious related, you know, you've got to listen to this record. I highly recommend it. It's raw. It's brutal. The vocals are just this strange guttural sound for death metal. It's not a typical death metal thing like a Cannibal Corpse or something. This has definitely got their own sound, and it's another thing that I love about them. I had heard death metal before this, and it didn't resonate, but when I heard Once Dead, what was the year on this? That's what I was trying to look at. I should have been saying the years. Goodness gracious. Maybe I wrote it down. Anyway, I didn't write it down. It's hard for me to read on there, but anyway, this has been around for a long, long time, and they're one of the early pioneers, not one of the starters of death metal, but definitely one of the pioneers. So Once Dead by Vengeance Rising, highly recommend this one. Another one that is my absolute favorite that is a second release, not metal, is The Breeder's Last Splash. I am obsessed with this record. I listen to it all the time. Probably one of my favorite cassettes that I own. I listen to this a lot of the times when I'm packing record orders for the website or something like that. Still to this day, holding up. I've heard a lot of people that say, you know, cassettes don't last or they don't sound good. And I am here to tell you otherwise. There is no singular format that's better than the other. It just kind of depends on album per album. And this one is just amazing on the cassette version. I think that the tape really does it justice. So The Breeders, and this one I did write down. It says it's 1983. 93. By the way, the Black Flag was released in 83, and the Suicidal Tendencies was released in 83. And this one I can't read. I wish I could. But anyway, I can't tell if that says maybe 1990. Yeah, 1990 possibly. I know it's not 80, so it's probably 90. So there you go. Breeder's Last Splash. Sorry, I'm a little all over the place. Very, very cool stuff and highly recommended. Very emotional sounding record, and it still has some grit. And even though it's classified as an alternative record, I give it a lot more than that. So coming up next, my favorite album by this band is their third release. So my record collection is just a catastrophe. It's all over the place, and I couldn't find the LP, but that's okay because we also have it on CD. Love It to Death by Alice Cooper. This is, in my opinion, one of the greatest rock and roll records ever released. There's plenty that could debate that. If you have a favorite rock and roll record that is not Alice Cooper, Love It to Death, tell me in the comments below. Let's talk a little bit about this. This thing is jam-packed. Caught in a Dream. The hit on here is I'm 18, but you got Long Way to Go, Black Juju, Is It My Body, Hallowed Be Thy Name, Be My Name, Second Coming, Ballad of Dwight Fry, which we're going to talk about again in a minute, and Sun Arise. Alice Cooper, Love It to Death. Absolutely amazing. If you've never heard this and you are a fan of rock and roll, this one will take you places. Still on the third album, I couldn't pick one. I wanted to talk about Henry Rollins, the Rollins Band, End of Silence. Another one from the car years that just, man, I wish I had the cassette. Oh, I wish I had it. This would have hands down been my pick for the third, but since I didn't have it, I had to dig around a little bit. But this one has been on my streaming playlist since I don't have the record, don't have the cassette. My CD's lost somewhere. It's probably in a box, who knows where. But regardless, I've listened to this on a streaming circuit at least 5 times in the past 2 weeks. I love this record and couldn't wait to just show that I still held on to the case because I loved it so much. Let's see, Rollins Band, 1992. 1992. My goodness, what a great time for music that was. As I was getting out this cassette, I just so happened to stumble onto my USA for MOD. Also empty. Oh, my goodness. People used to steal. This is my Vengeance Rising penance that I'm having to pay here. One of my favorite crossovers, much like the Suicidal Tendencies, I could give them credit for, but this MOD cassette, as a young kid learning how to play music, I listened to this record so much, almost as much as I did Master of Reality by Black Sabbath. This one really helped me cut some teeth to get into the music world. I love this record. USA for MOD, still packed full of jams that would make any music fan proud. So 2 cassette cases only, 1 CD mention, and then we're getting into the one that really, when I started thinking about it, I was like, we got to talk about this record. It is my chance because Corsario Negro by Los Natas. This is hands down my favorite release by this band. It is a stoner, psychedelic kind of thing. They're from Argentina. Highly recommend this one. If you've never heard it, it's on Small Stone Records. This record is amazing. It's got just enough of everything that you need to really take you places. Like I said, it's a little psychedelic at times, but it's just straight up good stoner rock. It is where the band kind of took a departure from the vein of Caius. A lot of people might say their early stuff sounds a lot like Caius, and it does. But this one takes its own page. It just writes its own story. Highly recommend this one if you've never heard it. Los Natas, Corsario, Negro. Absolute fire of an album. one of my all-time favorites. If I had to do a top 10 list, this one's going to be in there, and I'm taking it to the desert island, and I'm going to probably destroy it trying to find a way of listening to it with a seashell or something like that. So, that was our number... Were we on 4? We were on 3. That was our number 3. So, a whole bunch of stuff that we talked about for our third favorite. But there's a lot to consider, right? A lot to consider. Okay, so now we're getting into number 4. This means that my favorite album by this band was their 4th release. This one was almost a no-brainer for me when I looked at the discography. Melvins' Lysol. The day I picked up this cassette, some friends of mine had gotten in a car, drove to the local mall, which for me is maybe 35 minutes away from my home. I bought this cassette. We dropped it into the cassette player, and if you've ever heard this, it starts off with this really slow, droning track. And we were on the interstate laughing about what they were doing to us. And it really sets the mood. It slowly gets heavier and heavier, and it really just dips you right into that style of what the Melvins are so well known for, which is basically keeping you on your toes. You have no clue what's coming next. And by the time this kicked in, we were almost off of the interstate. I would say, I think the track's 10 minutes long, maybe, something like that. I can't remember. But either way, by the time it kicked in, we were all in the car going, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever. So the Melvins, Lysol is the name of it, but you notice that it does not say Lysol. They had a lawsuit. I don't know if they were sued or if they just decided to drop it or how that went down, but it was or is called Lysol, and they took the name off of the album. But later years, a friend of mine walked into the record store and was like, hey man, I got this Melvins record. And they show it to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, please sell me the record, please. And they said, no, I'm going to take it home. I want to give it a listen, which I totally understood. And I told them I was jealous. If you ever decide to sell it, please let me know. Well, they went home. I'm not sure if they actually listened to the whole record or not. I'm going to give them credit and say they did and didn't like it. But I think that they probably got impatient with it. Took it to a record store in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is about an hour from me, and traded it in for something that was nowhere near as good, I'm sure. And then I wound up going to a record convention where I was selling records. A friend of mine who owned the shop was also selling records, and I had found out what had happened. What had transpired is that he sold my Melvins record. So I was like, hey man, you got that Melvins record? I heard tell that it was sold to you. He said, yeah, I've got it at the shop. It's not here. I was like, dude, I will buy it right now if you'll run over to the shop, which was 5 minutes from the convention. I watched the guy's stuff. He ran up there, brought this back, and sold it to me for way, way more than what the other guy was going to sell it to me for, because as you can see, there's a little bit of tape here. It said Lysol, and they taped over it. This is one of the originals. I don't know if you can... I should have took this out of the sleeve. Sorry about this. It's going to rip. But it does say Lysol on the spine, and it's been marked out. So that's a little coolness there. There's the tape where they taped over the Lysol, and I don't know if they spray painted the tape or how exactly they did that. But this one is now mine, and I can say that I have one of the early presses of the Melvins Lysol, one of my all-time favorite Melvins records, and that's why it's my number 4. Good story with the cassette, good story with the album. Things like that happen from time to time, and I'm glad to share them. Glad to have a chance to talk about them. I wish I could get everybody on the horn and we could talk about this experience, because that's funny. And to the guy who sold this to somebody else without selling it to me, I got it anyway. I love you, man. It's okay. I'm just harassing people at this point. Okay, so Lysol, 1992. But I'm not stopping there. I also wanted to talk about one of my all-time favorite, Horses in the Sky by the Silver Mount Zion Memorial Orchestra and Tra-La-La Band. This one features members of Godspeed You Black Emperor, and this is a double LP. It's actually 3-sided, I believe. It is just packed full of all kinds of cool artwork. I don't know how far we want to dig into this. I guess we've got time, right? Why not? Lots of cool artwork. Lots of neat insert there. I'm actually not going to dig it all out. You guys can buy one on your own and check it out. But yeah, this is a beautiful, beautiful album. One that, in times, will just absolutely bring me to tears. This is a beautiful, beautiful thing. The way they orchestrate their music, it does have vocals, whereas Godspeed You Black Emperor does not. Very mellow, dark, a lot of emotional lyrics, and the way the lyrics are put together, it has what they call vocal rounds, where maybe you've done this in elementary school, where somebody starts singing "Row, row, row your boat," and then by the time you're done with that sentence, another person starts singing "Row, row, row your boat," and it's called rounds. It's a big chorus, or rolling chorus, I should say. They do a lot of that. Very, very well worth your time. Very emotional and a beautiful and delicate record. Lots of good stuff to talk about, but I could go on, but we still got a long way to go here. So this is, in my number 4, the Silver Mount Zion Memorial Orchestra and Tra-La-La Band, Horses in the Sky. Please don't sleep on this record. One time I bought a copy of this record, put it in a box, and mailed it out into the world. We had 20 friends on a list, and everybody listened to it, passed it on to the next person. Everybody listened, passed it on to the next person. And it made it all the way around the United States, from Tennessee, all the way down to New Orleans, all the way up to Maine, all the way across the West Coast. Was supposed to go to California, but the person in California moved to Texas, went to Texas, then it come all the way back up the coast, back to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and then back to me. I absolutely love this record. And yeah, we did the traveling record with it. So, it's worth that. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm willing to buy a copy for people just to hear. That's how much I love it. So, there's that. Up next... Oh, wait. What was the year on that one? Horses in the Sky, 2005. 2005. So, up next, this one was a no-brainer. 1984, Powerslave. You remember me talking about going to record stores in Knoxville? Well, this is a different record store that I picked this up at, and it was cool because when I was sifting through the bins, I noticed it had this border, and it says Special Limited Edition. The bottom of it says Virgin Maiden vinyl pressing. Kind of neat to have. Just nothing too spectacular or anything, but for $9.99 US, why not grab it, right? And it was the first introduction I had to Iron Maiden was this record. I remember watching Headbangers Ball, and the Can I Play With Madness song came on. I found out I loved it, immediately went out to the music store, looked at all the cassettes, and they did not have the Seventh Son record. So I started looking at the artwork, and I had to decide, and as you know, Iron Maiden, the masters of the artwork in those early years, you had to decide. I'm looking at this great discography with all the amazing artwork. What do you choose? I decided to go with Powerslave. I loved the art, still to this day love the art. Wound up getting it home, and this is still one of my all-time favorites by Iron Maiden, Powerslave, packed full of all of the juices you need for a growing boy. Iron Maiden 1984, Powerslave. Excuse me. Up next, one that's a little strange. This is my favorite album by the band, and it is their 6th release. By the way, Powerslave was their 5th release. So their 6th release, Oxbow, The Narcotic Story. If you've never heard this record, it is extremely art rock style, heavy at times, totally psychotic. It sounds like you're listening to a man have a mental breakdown vocally, and the music on here is unlike anything else that I've ever heard on an album. In fact, I should just say that about Oxbow. Oxbow is unlike any other band that I've ever heard. They have their own vibe, and if you've ever heard one record, you might have a general idea of what they sound like, but you've still not heard the next record. Highly recommend this one, The Narcotic Story. This gatefold is awesome. I love it. It just looks really nice and clean, and the music itself, it is so interesting. Again, I could talk about the vocals because they're so unique, but I really want to drill in on how much I love what the band does behind the vocals. It is so intriguing and pulls you in, and where I was talking about that emotional stuff earlier with a Silver Mount Zion, this has the kind of emotion that just makes you, I don't know how to say, it's not like you get angry or anything, but it does something to you mentally, this is a bizarre listen and hands down one of my favorites by the band. And I'm not just saying it because it's their 6th record. I'm saying you need to listen to this record. The Narcotic Story, Oxbow. I don't know if I would put it in my top 10, but man, it might make a top 20 because I love this record. So, anyway, it gave me a chance to talk about it. Very, very cool stuff. Oxbow, Narcotic Story, if I can get this sleeve in there. One last look. Highly recommended. Up next, the band's 7th album is my all-time favorite in their discography. That is going to be Turbonegro, Retox. The first time I heard this band, I was at a show in Knoxville, Tennessee at the Pilot Lot, and I walked up to the person behind the bar and I was like, hey, what are we listening to? And she broke out a copy of Turbonegro's Ass Cobra, and she was kind of like, this is what we're listening to. Wouldn't hand it to me. She was just like, yeah, this is it. Enjoy it. And then she took it away from me, and I made a mental note to pay attention to Turbonegro from that moment on. Later on, they released Retox, and I gotta say, this is another fantastic rock and roll masterpiece. What is rock? They'll tell you in this album if you know what I'm talking about. This is a death rock and roll masterpiece, in my opinion. A lot of people will go with those early records. This one is going to be my all-time favorite in the discography, and that's not putting anything out. I'm telling you, some of those early records are great as well, but Turbonegro Retox, when I heard this one, I knew at that very moment I was hearing a masterpiece in the world of rock and roll and death rock and just punk rock in general. There's something nasty about this record in a beautiful, beautiful way. Lots of humor in the lyrics, great tight riffs, everything you need. Well, like I said, a growing boy needs this one. Turbonegro Retox, highly recommended. My favorite, and it was their 7th release in 2007. So there you go. Up next. Okay, this is where we get a little fuzzy. I didn't know how to take this one, so I went in a few different directions just so that way I could clarify my choices. And it didn't really matter anyway, because Neurosis and Jarbo, this is probably my favorite of their releases that is a collaboration. This is the only album that Neurosis did with Jarbo, and it is so bizarre and weird. And it was released in, let's see, where are we at here? 03. Released in 03, making it their 8th release, technically. It was originally released on CD, reissued eventually on vinyl, and this artwork is by Aaron, if you know him from ISIS. Aaron Turner. This record is an emotional masterpiece. The way Jarbo blends in with Neurosis is the perfect collaboration for them to have brought on. It just feels like it's just like a comfortable t-shirt that you've always worn, Neurosis and Jarbo. The first time I heard this, like I said, it was originally released on CD. I was kind of like, I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence with this one. Listened to it, went to sleep, woke up the next morning, dropped that thing in my CD player while I was getting ready for work. But instead of pressing play, I hit random shuffle. And while I was listening to this record, the beauty of what they were doing really called out to me. Everything from that moment clicked. I listened to the record later from front to back. Still, no other record sounds like this, and the way that they did this is literally a masterpiece in my opinion. So Neurosis and Jarbo. But I'm not sure if we can call a collaboration a favorite album, because this is listed in their discography as an official release, but it's a collaboration. So just to confirm, my favorite solo by the band is Neurosis Eye of Every Storm, which just so happened to come out in 04, directly after that. They actually toured together, so you would be seeing material from both of these albums if you went to that tour, which I did. I actually drove from Tennessee to Atlanta, Georgia to watch Slayer on Thanksgiving that year, and then turned around and drove from Atlanta, Georgia all the way north to Philadelphia to see Neurosis and Jarbo. perform the material from these two albums. So, hands down, my favorite Neurosis solo is Eye of Every Storm. Again, an emotional masterpiece. There's moments in this record where I can really feel tears getting in my eyes that I'm just like, they captivate me. No River to Take Me Home has this kind of a vocal, just a moaning pulse. It just drags you in. And I'm a longtime Neurosis fan. This one still absolutely takes the cake for me. So Neurosis, Eye of Every Storm in 04. Or, if you count the collaboration, Neurosis and Jarbo in 03. Now, this is another piece of fuzzy info. When I was putting this together, I really wanted to talk about the importance of Pink Floyd's Live in Pompeii. This VHS is probably one of the most influential things that's ever been put in my VHS player. I've watched this over and over. I made a copy of the audio on cassette so I could listen to it in the car. Everything about this release is life-changing to those who enjoyed it when it first came out. But that's where the hiccup is. I thought this was actually going to land in my number 8 spot at first. But when I started doing the research, I'm looking here, it says 1972 on the sleeve, but this release is not the theatrical one, or I don't believe it is anyway. It says that there was a release in 72 that did not contain the bonus footage of them recording Dark Side of the Moon. This one does have that footage, which puts it at 1974. So that means it happened after the Neurosis stuff, and therefore it is discredited. I know it's already discredited because it's not actually an album release. It was only video, but man, I gotta talk about this because it was such an important part of my childhood and musical growth, and I still love Pink Floyd to this day. So Pink Floyd, Live at Pompeii, getting the honorable mention of being either number 8 or 9, whichever you want to put it at. Pink Floyd, Live at Pompeii. Not an official album release, but hey, we're here to talk about music and have fun, right? So it gets in my list. Up next, number 9. 1976, Steve Miller, Fly Like an Eagle. This is a classic rock jammer. When you look at the track list on this, if I can get my glasses up here, you've got side 1 with Space Intro into Fly Like an Eagle, Wild Mountain Honey, Serenade, Dance, 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 Mercury Blues, Take the Money and Run, Rockin' Me, You Send Me. I mean, this is a Blue Odyssey, Sweet Marie, The Window. This is basically the entire greatest hits record all on one record. And it deserves every bit of that acknowledgement, in my opinion. Steve Miller, Fly Like an Eagle. This is nothing that people probably don't hear on the radio. But if you've never heard this record in its entirety, which you basically have if you own the greatest hits, I highly recommend this one. And that Space Intro into Fly Like an Eagle just really sets the tone perfectly for a great rock and roll record. Rock and roll classic! Rock and roll classic. Steve Miller. Shout out to Steve Miller. I was also listening to a interview where apparently he's responsible for developing the in-ear monitor for musicians. Said that they were having some hearing problems on stage, so he wanted to do something to help the guys not go deaf, which they technically already were. So, yeah, shout out to Steve Miller for making things better for everybody, musically and technologically. So, 1976, coming up next, 1977, I still get to talk about Pink Floyd, Animals, 1977, one of my all-time favorite, and this is their 10th release. Can you believe 10 albums in, and Pink Floyd is melting your mind with Animals? This is one of the most beautiful, beautiful pieces of music. Again, we're talking about those top 10 albums. Pink Floyd Animals is going to be one that gets put on the playlist over and over again. When it starts playing, I know I'm in love with this record, and I just slowly always inch up that volume while it's playing. A little bit more. A little bit more. Just a little bit more. And then when it's over, you're like, man, let's just keep it going. It's already cranked up. Let's make it happen. Pink Floyd Animals, 1977, and that is their 10th release. Since we already talked about Pink Floyd, I wanted to close out with a cassette Motorhead 1916, another cassette that has stuck with me. It says that this one was released in 1990. 1990, the band was a 4-piece at this point, and Motorhead 1916 means so much to me personally and emotionally. When my wife and I got married, we listened to Motorhead all day long. I made a Motorhead mix CD of all of our favorites, and we listened to Motorhead that entire day, got married in the morning, and listened to Motorhead all damn day. What better bride could I have? I love you, baby! Motorhead 1916. I hope you all find a lady that is that loving. This one has been in my car and around since so many years. I'm so bad, baby, I don't care. What else do we have on here? I'm the one to sing the blues, No Voices in the Sky, Going to Brazil, Nightmare, The Dream Time, Love Me Forever, Angel City, Make My Day, Ramon, Shut You Down, and 1916. Be good to everybody, people. This is where we're closing out, and I will talk to you again soon. Once again, shout out to Metal Mickey. This was really interesting. The more I started getting into digging around, I realized that some of my favorites didn't land exactly where I thought they did, and I really had to start manipulating and moving some puzzle pieces around just to get to 10. And I want to give a shout out to Mark G with a C for doing his follow-up video that alerted me to this. So thank you for following, liking, subscribing, and all that stuff. The vinyl community here is extremely fun to be part of. So shout out to all of you. Don't forget to post some comments in the belows and let me know that you're out there. I'd love to chat with you some more. My name's Bobby. I will talk to you again later. Take care.